It's crazy to think we're already 3 episodes into Dynazenon, but it feels like this show is just flying by in the best possible way. And while sure, every episode has ended on a giant kaiju-like battle, most of the episodes are really just the characters interacting with each other in very realistic and genuine ways. I talked about it last week how the dialogue just feels very human, as if people are talking, and this episode once again just reaffirms all that. It's saying, hey, kaiju's destroying streets and buildings, that's an everyday occurrence for these characters, so there's a reason why for the viewers watching, if this is their first experience with something like this in terms of anime or live-action television, or if it's not your first rodeo and you've seen plenty of shows like this, there's a reason for characters having kind of nonchalant reactions, be like, oh, I have friends or I know someone whose street was destroyed by a kaiju. Yeah, that sucks. Kind of the same way, I guess, most people in just countries that have to deal with natural disasters have to just grow used to things like earthquakes if they're not at like a catastrophic level. But the thing that kind of got me off guard this week was actually just general body reactions and how a lot of the characters are interacting with each other. The dialogue remained just as realistic and I think engaging, but there's moments with like characters like Yume as an example. She's sitting on the bench and her friend comes up and she basically rests her chin on her head. It's a very simple moment, but it's the type of directing that really gives me a sense that these characters are friends. A lot of times I feel like anime friends, they hang out together, but there's no real indication, I feel like, that they've known each other and been around each other for a long period of time. When I grew up, the big thing that I noticed that, with friendship and little groups of people would be that the guys would talk a lot of shit to people they were close to, and the girls would be very clingy and very, connected on a physical level, whether it's hugging or, resting their head on their shoulders and things like that. And to me, just seeing something like that, even though it's very brief, it adds to that level of realism that you can understand why these two have such a good connection without words needing to be spoken. It's something that I feel like a lot of times that these anime just don't get right, because it's a lot easier to have a shot with a bunch of characters standing around, maybe waving arms, versus, figuring out ways to make it feel like they're genuinely connected. It just feels like this is a show that's being directed from a person who understands what real connections actually are. And just because you have giant kaijus and beasts fighting in a town doesn't mean you can't have some realism with its overall body reactions and general dialogue. He bumps into someone who he knew when he was younger, who I guess was a bit of a delinquent by the looks of it, was tossing rocks into I guess abandoned building, unless it was an actual building that was being used. And we learn that she's married, but it also kind of gives me the impression that maybe the marriage isn't that good. Maybe it was just a simple exchange of numbers, but there was something more there, it felt like. I don't know if I was the only one feeling it. Just the general banter and things like that, or even when Yume and Yomogi end up going towards I think it was the school music room, and they're trying to investigate what happened with the sister or just getting to know more. I like the moment where she actually brings up the fact that, her and her sister pretty much had no connection and she was never invited to any of her rehearsals, but the one that she was invited was the one that she never got to see her perform at because she ended up dead, right? It's such an interesting concept having all these miniature stories that feel pretty grounded to reality, where then you have Gamma, who apparently died 5,000 years ago and has been revived in this era. That's something that I think definitely adds a bit of spice to it, where you have all these personal, realistic stories, and then you sprinkle in the best boy story here, which is kind of seemingly driven by some form of love or some sort of connection at the very least, whether it was family, whether it was friends, whether it was romantic, who knows, right? But I like the idea of pretty much kicking off this episode exactly how we ended last week. Most of the characters seem pretty chill, but then you have one who's very hot-headed. You can probably understand why, because if we've seen Gamma's persona, we see this guy's persona, they kind of feel like they're almost the exact same person. So if one pisses off the other, they're just going to keep yelling at each other like miniature dogs who think they're a lot tougher than they probably are, and they're just going to keep kicking and screaming until they tire themselves out. But I think it adds for a fun spice to it, because I'm not sure if this guy's the leader or he's just kind of the one who's the most mature, but I like his kind of idea of being the more kaiju users on our side, the better it is. Just because you're pissed off at Gamma doesn't mean we need to kill all these characters. I mean, it would make a lot more sense to have them join our side. And the fact that even the characters themselves just don't immediately say, you know what, just because we've been hanging out with Gamma doesn't mean he's a good guy. If these guys are saying, he used to work for us, he betrayed us, what if, he's actually not that great of a guy? And the fact that characters like Yomogi aren't stupid, he's saying, I don't really trust either one of them, but we gotta, at the very least, figure out what each side is saying. I like how they're not blindsided by just because they're younger, that they should immediately trust in these people. given the personas that we've experienced with this cast of characters, while yes, they definitely have a sort of innocence to them, they also aren't the most dense and clueless anime kids that you've ever run across in the anime medium. And that's what makes an episode like this really engaging through and through, all the miniature stories coming together, and they even still manage to sprinkle in comedy, like our boy eating floor crabs as then he goes to his construction job. There's just a lot of mystery surrounding the show, so it keeps you engaged even when big battles aren't happening. And then when the big battles do happen, they, in very Power Rangers fashion, just continue to spice it up. Throw in a sword, throw in a new form, go into space. And I love the idea that even when you think the battle's over, as long as there's still a head moving, it seems like these kaiju users can still have a chance at victory. It was just really funny. I don't know if I was the only one feeling this, because like I mentioned, I think Gamma and this other guy, they're very similar, they're very hot-headed, and they're very if they feel like they need to do something, they're never gonna back down. When it's just the two heads basically chomping on each other, just kind of felt like a hate kiss to me, and I just lost it. I thought it was hilarious and a little badass all at the same time. I don't know, it just feels like this is a show that definitely is doing what I loved about Gridman, but also having me not want to compare it in the slightest. Obviously, it's set in the same universe or the same type of idea, but it feels like the characters to the battles to just the individual personal stories, it feels like Dynazenon rather than Gridman. And I feel like a lot of times these shows that, try to carry on the previous one's legacy, they kind of just feel like it's a rehash, but I've seen a lot of people, actually, I haven't seen really any, at least in my comments, saying oh, it feels like we're just getting a discounted Gridman. I'm seeing a lot of people say, if this keeps on, it could be just as good, if not better than Gridman, which is a really great sign for only being 3 episodes in, and the type of insanity we experience in Gridman. Just good stuff. I mean, even the idea of the power of friendship, even though it's a little ridiculous them talking in the middle of a battlefield, when your entire point of survival is relying and connecting via heart and trust, you need to have Gamma speak the truth, otherwise their form wouldn't be able to take hold and be able to destroy the enemy in front of them. So I don't know, it just feels like this show is constantly covering its tracks. It's being ridiculous while also being serious in a very neutral way, which you don't get to experience in a show with giant robot-looking creatures fighting giant kaiju-looking creatures, right? But I mean, leave it to Dynazenon to just nail it through and through. Often when I watch a show like this, I always want to hear new music, especially in battle sequences. I'm pretty sure I could be misremembering. All 3 battles have essentially ended with the main Dynazenon theme song active as they deliver their kind of final blow. That song, if you're telling me that you're not getting hyped up when you hear the main theme kick in and they're about to deliver that finishing blow, you're not feeling like an 8-year-old kid again. I mean, granted, you're probably not lying, but for me, I couldn't even try to tell you that. It just makes me feel giddy, it makes me feel excited, and there's only certain shows that allow you to feel like a kid again while also being able to appreciate a lot of the nuances with the writing all at the same time. But I think Gridman and Dynazenon are one of the cases where it really does know how to do both. Let me know your thoughts and feelings down below. What was your favorite moment? I'm sure a lot of people will always love the action, but if there's a more personal moment, definitely let me know yours down below, because I think my personal was just that whole clubroom scene with the whole sister storyline. The sister storyline is this thing that's really hooking me in the most, even though a character like Gamma is clearly my favorite. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, share your support, and hit that subscribe button if you happen to be new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.